What is going on, you guys? That was a good one. So today I just want to make a quick video for you talking about why and how it'll help you to basically become at play with your day. So like creative and being a producer. So there's a couple different aspects on this to touch on, and I've talked about them a little bit in previous videos in a lighter way, but let's just dive into it here. So basically, one big thing that will be helpful for you to take away from this video is, so you might have heard the term inner child before, and regardless of what you think about it, apply it to this situation. So most people, they ignore their inner child, or they don't know how to soothe their inner child, and their inner child has been suppressed almost their entire life. So like by around like the age of 7, or maybe a little bit later depending, you have all these ideas and things like, don't do this, you should do that, like all these ideas, like this is who you should be, this is what you should do, this is bad, this is good, right? And we're taught to basically, a lot of us are taught to become those who follow directions well. Like we listen right through school, right? You know, don't fail, that's bad. In the real world, you know that failing is a good thing because you learned and you can succeed faster because of that. Now, on top of this, most people, this means, by the way, that you're taught essentially not to be so creative. This doesn't happen to everybody, but basically, you're taught not to be creative, and this is why most people are workers and not free thinkers or creative with their life, right? A lot of people didn't design their own lifestyle, and of course, you know, there's only so many ways you can mix and match your own lifestyle when you design it. But like most people, they just follow like you know, the American dream is like a perfect example. Like, you know, go to school, maybe get in some debt, get a mortgage, maybe get a loan, so you're in debt again for that. Wife and kids, white picket fence. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. And so you know, you see what's happening is like you're following this programming, and it's not like, you know, it's all always bad, but again, right? I mean, obviously, like student loan debt, mortgage, like you don't want to get into that. And I mean, even like a perfect example is the kid who thinks they wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. There's a difference between actually wanting to do that and the one that was programmed to do that by, for example, their parents, who either were also a doctor or a lawyer, or they didn't do that and they wish that they did that, so they're projecting that onto their kid, right? Like I did all this so that you can become a doctor and lawyer, and they give you all these reasons growing up, like why it's going to be so great, and you do it. And then eventually one day you wake up and you realize, wait a minute, is that really what I wanted? No, they told me that's what I wanted. So what would I have done if I did what I really wanted? Which brings it all the way back into that you lacked creativity, or you had it suppressed, so you're sort of blinded in that moment. So when you bring this back to the idea of the inner child, most people, when we grow up, you know, we have like difficulty either addressing the inner child, and sometimes that shows up in like conversations where you get more emotional, or you defend yourself, or you self-sabotage, right? Like you try to protect yourself, because our default state, funny enough, one of them at least, is being in survival mode. Like that's like what our brain tries to do. So it always tries to protect us, right? And sometimes the protecting isn't needed, but it does things to make us choose the path that's safer rather than a little bit riskier, which is why we bring it all back to this, right? Like so many people are doing like the 9 to 5, or they're a doctor or a lawyer because someone else told them, and they weren't creative with their future, or they didn't design their own life, right? And if you don't have the inner child suppressed, or if you can learn to unlock that, basically you can unlock a whole different kind of lifestyle, a whole different type of wealth too, right? Because you can start making the kind of money you really want just by doing what you really want. And of course, there's nuance to this, right? Because you have your starving artist, and then you have someone who was creative in their life, who could be an artist or a musician, or they could be something else, right? Like maybe they just became entrepreneurial and they started a business, or some kind of online community or YouTube channel, or like drop shipping or whatever it is, right? Like the world is essentially your oyster, and it's unlimited, and all we've been doing is limiting ourselves, right? It's no one else that's stopping you. It doesn't matter what other people think. You're stopping yourself. So you're basically self-sabotaging yourself in these situations, whether you're worried about what other people think, because it's like a tribal, a community thing, right? Just like, back to our ancestors, basically, like getting the approval, or you just don't know how, right? Like you're limiting yourself, and you always did things this way, and you learn what was like the way that you should do things, right? So this is a long way of saying that if you can learn to tap into that inner child, like basically become friends with them, you can cooperate together to be creative with your current life. So if you're in a position, and by the way, there's nothing wrong if you're in some sort of like job or 9 to 5 because you really want to do it, right? And because you really want to do it, not because like someone else told you, or you get the idea, right? So your government, society, your parents, your girlfriend, whatever, right? Like do it because you really wanted to. And no matter what, you're gonna fail and learn faster because of that. And don't be scared of that, because school taught you to be afraid of failure. Like, don't fail your test. That's bad. But they're teaching you how to become a certain kind of person. And basically less of a risk taker, more of the safe road, versus someone who can basically absolutely demolish or crush it in life because they're creative, because they're willing to go for it, because they know no matter what, they're loved, right? Like all these different things. And that goes back to the inner child thing. So this brings me to like one last point. And you might have heard something like this before. Maybe not, but basically all of that logic also goes into most people being followers and consumers, right? They consume everything that they're told, right? Like whether it's like, you should read these books, or they watch a bunch of Netflix, or doom scroll on social media, or they spend all their day watching YouTube videos instead of applying the knowledge that they're learning, because hopefully they're watching some self-improvement content that will help them, rather than like funny videos or things like that, right? You want to keep leveling up, like the self-soothing, all that, the consumption, Netflix, adult entertainment, video games, social media, too much content. You become a consumer, and we're meant to be creators, right? Everything was created, and you're consuming and using a lot of these things. How much are you creating though? And I know like people probably get stuck in the idea of like it just being like an artist thing, right? Like a book author, a painter, a musician. But think about those examples I told you about earlier. Like designing your own life, right? Like what kind of place do you want to live in? Is it in the mountains? Is it by a beach? Is it in a city? Does it require a car, or can you walk to everything all day long, right? And easily walk to it. What kind of fitness level do you have? What sort of foods do you eat? What does your body look like? What does your style look like? What does your future wife generally look like? I know that one can be a little bit difficult to imagine, but you start to picture some of these things, and you realize that you can design it, and you can also reverse engineer some of those things. Like okay, this is where I want to be. What sort of steps do I need to take to get there? And you can relentlessly go after these things, so you can be creative with whatever kind of business you want to start, whatever kind of lifestyle, and doing whatever you want to be creative. And there's tons of ways that you can do this, again, right? I mean, obviously, like, this is a created YouTube video, and even I used to, like, hold myself back from doing this, like, oh, I need one of those mics everybody has, or a Shure mic, or the perfect camera, or this and that. And then eventually it was just like, just start creating, and then you'll figure it out as you go. So this is a long way of saying, make friends with your inner child, tap back into that, things you've always wanted to do and try, things you would do for fun, regardless of if you were getting paid to. And then maybe you can even monetize that if you want to, right? It's not like it's something you have to do. You should be passionate about it in general. And oftentimes that's something you can monetize if you want to, right? Like, personal trainers liked working out, and then they started doing that. I used to write music for video games, and then, I grew up a musician and was playing video games, and I turned that into a gig, basically, right? And I networked with a lot of people who did that sort of thing. And so you can see, right, like, there's lots of ways that you can turn what you're really into helping others and providing value for others in a creative way. So just take some time to, like, think about that. Like, sit with yourself in quiet, maybe write it down, and visualize some potential options. And oftentimes you probably know. That's probably the best place to end this video, is you probably know exactly the idea or the few ideas that you've been wanting to try, and you've always suppressed, or you forget about it for a while, and you remember, like, oh, like, that is something that I always thought would be cool to try, and maybe even make, like, a business or something out of. I mean, it's because you're interested in it. Follow that childlike innocence and, like, that interest. Like, you as a kid, you would try it for sure, and you're just suppressing it. And when you can start to be at more play, even just with, like, socializing with people, more play, like, people can sense it, and it's a lot more attractive. So I know there's a bit of a tangent in this, but I really hope that some of this information is helpful for you and can help you start to open up your life in a way that you really want to live it. Hope this helps, and you got this, bro.